Texas tonight.
Oh, the politician's theme song. It's Michael Patrick Shields. Well, I promise you no spin. In media stat virtus, the truth is in the middle. And President Biden is red-faced. Why? Because he's embarrassed? No. He was in the Virgin Islands over the holidays, and the 81-year-old got a big old sunburn. Where was Dr. Jill Biden with the sunblock for President Biden? You have to be careful about those sorts of things. And right now, voters, their choice in 2024 between Trump and Biden, well, they did a survey, and they figured out what do people equate with these two men. And when it comes to Biden, nothing. When it comes to Trump, revenge. Those are the two words that surfaced. And that's our choice at the moment, and that's the way it looks like it's going to go. Now, we don't really know. A long way to go yet. We got to get through primaries and caucuses and just plain living at that age. But what will happen next? Dave Dulio, the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University and a distinguished professor in the political science department there in Rochester, is on our AT&T line. Happy election New Year to you, sir. Here we go.
Good morning, Michael Patrick. Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
I say here we go, but here we've been going. I mean, the campaign's been going since the day the last one ended, it sort of seems to me.
That's par for the course in American politics with the phenomenon of the permanent campaign that seems like we are always in campaign mode and somebody's always campaigning for something.
And now comes January 6th, the anniversary. We get to hear now, X number of years ago, this happened. In fact, as we hear from Michael Kastner here reporting, more than a third of Americans believe the Biden victory was illegitimate. Here he is.
The Washington Post University of Maryland survey found 36% of respondents said Joe Biden was not legitimately elected president, compared to 62% who believe he was. Along party lines, 91% of Democrats believe the 2020 election was legitimate, while just 31% of Republicans agreed. The poll comes just days before the 3-year anniversary of the 2021 Capitol riot, when supporters of former President Trump stormed the Capitol to try to stop the certification of Biden's election win. I'm Michael Kastner.
You should see the polling result on whether the Dallas victory over the Lions was legitimate, Dave Dulio. That's even stronger.
No doubt. The surprising number there for me, Michael Patrick, is the 9% of Democrats who don't think that Joe Biden was elected legitimately. I'm curious to know who those folks are.
Well, I guess, it depends on what you mean by the word legitimate. It was a very different election on the ground than we've ever had before in the United States. Isn't that fair to say, at least?
It most definitely is, given the COVID-19 pandemic and the way that the election was both the way the campaign was executed and the way the election was administered was very, very different. I would also put this into some context too, right? It's not the first time that we've seen folks question, rhetorically anyway, the legitimacy of an election. We've seen that we saw that in 2016 with some pretty prominent Democrats who are on record, saying that Trump was an illegitimate president, and even some others in the wake of some campaigns and elections after that.
Since we're going to hear a lot about it, and you just heard about it in that report, in fact, was there any way anybody, including those people who went into the Capitol, were truly going to stop the certification of the election?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the legitimate practice of questioning or challenging electoral votes is something that was brought up by more than 100, I believe, members of the House and the Republican side. And there is a process that is in place for that where both chambers vote on whether or not a challenge to electoral votes is warranted. And that 2020 was not the first time that's ever happened. We can go back to 2004 when George W. Bush was elected president, and some Democrats challenged electoral votes from Ohio, right? So the process is legitimate and appropriate if somebody has a question about those things. But it's always taken care of by a vote in the chambers, and there were just not the votes that were going to be there to do anything different than certify that result.
So when we hear about the quote-unquote insurrection, the United States was not going to cease to exist that day because I don't even know how many people it was, 800, 2,000. I don't know how many people went into the Capitol that day. I mean, what were they really going to do?
I think that's a question that you'd have to ask some of those folks. And many of them, a handful of them, relatively speaking, are from Michigan, so maybe we could ask some of them. I
think sometimes people like to make hay and cause division, and they're never going to stop talking about that.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I think the real, I don't think those folks that went there really knew what they were doing, right? It really was a mob, right? Mm-hmm. And they just sort of my recollection, from video and reporting is that there was this mob that got caught up in contagion and really went in there they didn't have a plan, as far as I could tell. Somebody would probably disagree with that, and that's fine. But no, the United States as a nation and as a democracy was not going to cease to exist.
Fox News is going to have a town hall with President Trump in Des Moines, Iowa. The same day, January 10th, CNN is going to have a primary debate for the GOP. And from what I understand, the only two who qualified this time are Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley.
Yeah, I think that the Trump counter programming is again par for the course this election cycle. He's done this, I think, at every debate that has been had by a network and has featured his rivals. So that's nothing new. I do think it's notable that we really are winnowing it down to, as you say, this time Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, right? So we're getting to the point where it could be Trump versus one alternative, and I think that the forces that don't want to see Donald Trump as the GOP nominee, that's what they need, right? The non-Trump, the anti-Trump wing of the party, those supporters, what they need to happen is what they need to have happen is it be Trump versus one alternative, and hope that the support from all those other candidates goes behind that one alternative, and that might not still be enough to derail Trump's march to the GOP nomination.
Well, the Supreme Court's going to have something to say about it too, aren't they?
Well, you'd certainly think so, and these cases in Colorado and Maine that have come down, and the swirl of questions about ballot access in other states, including here in Michigan, seems likely to end up at the Supreme Court. But the Maine case was appealed yesterday, and it still has a number of steps to go.
This is why we turn to Dave Dulio at Oakland University. His students learn from him, and so do we. Thank you, sir. It's Michael Patrick Shields.